Hello, and welcome back to the Severed Floor. My name is Ebube, and you are listening to Popcorn for Dinner. We're learning a lot this season so far, and there's a lot of truth that's coming out. Milchick is stressed, Mark is confused, everybody else is probably hopeless, and I don't really know what to make of any of it. So I've called on my good friend Chinedu who is going to explain for me and hopefully for you why everyone is hopeless, what hope is left to be found, and in all honesty, what we can expect from this season. Chinedu, how are we doing so far?
Great, I'm doing good. I'm
happy for you because I'm confused, but go on.
I know we had a lot of theories in episode 1 that I believe have been thrown out of the window. So we're going to dissect that today. The
window is wide open because I still have some theories I want to hold on to, but clearly we need to reevaluate certain things. And I think since we're doing that, it's probably worth mentioning that we are joined by yet another special guest. Jerry is here with us today, people, and we know how much you love him. Honestly, this episode is going to require a lot of analysis. We've been lied to. I'm going to say that again. We have been lied to. So we need to actually figure things out for ourselves because Lumon is not going to give us any answers. Not yet, anyway. So I guess with that in mind, Jerry, welcome. How you doing?
Hey guys, I'm good. Just happy to be back.
Happy to have you. I suppose before we even get into any of this, let's get off the Severed Floor for a second. And let me ask you guys how you're doing in real life TV wise. What else are you watching? What should we recommend to the people before we start to dive into all the confusion?
So at the moment I'm only watching one other show, Mythic Quest. So it's
Mythic Quest is back. Okay. Is it back or are you watching the previous season?
I'm watching the previous season. There seems to be a theme with me where I'm enjoying workplace shows at the moment because Mythic Quest is also set in a video game production company. Yeah,
I love that show.
And will I call them wacky characters? But
I think they can be called wacky. Like that show is essentially It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia meets like, I don't know, Parks and Recreation. And it's obviously it's made by the same people who made It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So like that kind of adds up. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's just one of those quirky shows with characters that are like genuinely weird, but at the same time endearing. Like I think that should be back January 29th. So that's a good recommendation. Jerry, how about you?
Yeah.
Why am I blanking? I'm thinking, I feel
he's
like
only watching Severance, people. He's very committed to the cause.
Yeah, I know. There's that, and I feel like sometimes shows like this take so much of your brain power that you actually just want to switch off for everything else. So I've just been watching comedies. For out of boredom, I started rewatching Two Broke Girls because I don't think I ever finished.
Sorry, did you just say that you turn your brain off by watching comedy TV? Are you rude?
I mean, it's like specifically that type of comedy, like your Two Broke Girls, Big Bang Theory. You just want to like chill and not think about it too much.
So sitcoms filmed in front of a live audience,
pretty much,
or with laugh tracks. I guess
that's all I can think of that I've been watching. Because I think towards the tail end of last year, I was doing a lot of rewatches. I rewatched Insecure, Atlanta, BoJack Horseman. And then there were obviously shows that aired, like came out in that time. I was watching them too. But the things that have stuck have been the things that I've been rewatching, even going as far as Living Single. And now it's Two Broke Girls. And I don't know why, but it's just like, I can't say that I'm watching anything new, but I'm sure I am. I just can't remember in this very moment.
Okay, that's good. As for me, I probably spent a good amount of time on YouTube these days, but I suppose I've been trying to finish off Arcane season 2, which is really, really good. That show was always impressive. And I started watching this Korean show called When the Phone Rings. That's on Netflix. I I heard about it from, well, I think actually my sister watches it, but also I heard about it from this review page on Instagram called CWM Reviews. I think her name is Marilyn, and yeah, it's pretty, like, she has all these reviews about like various kinds of shows, most of them kind of like Korean for people who want to see that kind of media.
K-drama.
And the show is kind of wild because, like, essentially there's a guy who's married to this girl, but he's hiding that he's married to her because he doesn't want anyone to know. Then someone tries to kidnap her, and because he doesn't really care for her, he doesn't take it seriously. But then over time they get close. It's just one of those things where, like, you know that the Western side of the world would not come up with this storyline, literally. But it's very cool in that way, and yeah, I definitely gotten a bunch of other recommendations from there. Okay, so we're a bit grounded now, which I'm going to mess up by bringing us back to the 7th floor. Sorry, but I guess this episode I like, first of all, because it is, to me, a companion episode to episode 1. I always felt like the first 2 episodes would be that way. As soon as I saw their titles, like the first one is titled Hello, Miss Cobell, and this second one is titled Goodbye, Mrs. Selvig. Now, they're obviously referencing, you know, Patricia Arquette's character, who, you know, is just a major presence in the show. We didn't really see her in episode 1. And that goes to show how much she's gone from the lives of the severed workers. Because believe it or not, season 2, episode 1 is the first episode of this show that is completely on the severed floor. Like, we didn't see the Audi word at all.
Oh, really?
That's never happened before in the show, right? So this whole companion episode thing, like, where you're getting like a full story from each, but the story is enriched when you have the 2 episodes together. It reminds me of the end of Game of Thrones season 2, episode 10, and then season 3, episode 1. They were titled Vala Morgulis and Vala Dohaeris. Obviously, that Vala Dohaeris is the response to Vala Morgulis in that world. All men must die, all men must serve. And they're thematically interesting because they show parts of, you know, not just Daenerys' story, but Arya's story. And I think they're doing something similar here with not just Mark, but Heli. I think now it's safe to say that Mark and Heli are our dual protagonists of the show, right? Deuteragonists, as the dramaturgists would say. So, first of all, which episode did you guys like more, if at all? Like, were you comparing them? Was they actually enriched for you? Were all your questions actually answered in episode 1, and episode 2 just brought confusion? Like, how are we feeling?
So I would say I enjoyed both of them, same level. I do have more questions. I've got them all written in my notes. Happy to go through them throughout this episode. But I think, yeah, it was good to see Mrs. Cobell back. Well, live in front of our camera, and I think a lot of what her character does in this episode validates what we said in the previous episode. And also some theories which I've also heard from other podcasts. For example, you know, she's got a vendetta against the company itself. I never believed that. But this episode is starting to make me think.
So you just thought I was insane last week, and now I'm vindicated.
Yes, no, I was a strong no that she's, you know, she loves the company, but I believe now I do see where she has some things against the company, and also I'm having questions as to why the company fears her, or yeah, they do fear her. Because Heli tried to mask it. I mean, why would they offer her a promotion and keep her away from the 7th floor?
Good question. I think it could be that they don't trust her, but maybe you're right. Maybe there is something she can do, or that she knows that they don't want to kind of poke the bear of.
Where do you draw the line between trust and fear, or distrust and fear?
Parenting.
Fear in what sense? Like, fear in the sense that Like, do you mean fear in the sense that she might, like, she's so incompetent that she could mess up your plans, or fear in the sense like she could destroy us, like,
I
truly,
think the second
like,
one
because
is what we're talking about.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly. So I'm
I
like,
think there's some story there. There's some story there that they're aware of. And I
Mhm.
don't know if they're aware that she knows, but there's definitely a story there.
yeah,
Okay. That's fair. I think the way they did the story is very cohesive. Dan Erickson, who created the show, is obviously a very, like, his imagination is pretty wild, right? We talked about him last week. So he wrote the premiere, and that was directed by Ben Stiller. And they kind of passed the torch on to Mohammed El Majri, who wrote this episode, and Sam Donovan, who directed this episode. I like how, you know, everything feels like one continuous thing. It's like they have these two perspectives. I actually wonder if they did that on purpose in a sense, because obviously this second team could have, you know, maybe done a later episode. And I think a lot of shows would do that, where like if there's going to be a companion piece to an episode, the same people who wrote and directed it will also do that. They'll kind of do it in tandem, maybe split it up in the edits. But this is almost like it really is two separate perspectives, because we have the inside perspective on the seventh floor in episode 1, and then we have the outside perspective in episode 2. And I actually feel I don't know that there's any that I prefer, but I suppose if I really had to pick one, I've definitely enjoyed the Audi perspective. At least I'm enjoying that in episode 2 now, maybe even more, simply because it's giving us more context. And I like that it's giving us more context. It's like there's certain things that we were expecting, certain questions that we had about how everybody would be feeling, how people would react, that we're now getting in this episode. And there's lots of pineapples in this episode too. I don't know that I don't know that pineapples are really going to play too much of a role in this show, though they might. Yeah, I guess it depends.
There's references to it as well, so maybe. But I think I'm inclined to be a lot like you in the sense that I like an episode that gives me answers, but that's also the thing. Like, you're basically asking me, do I prefer the mystery or the resolution? And I don't have an answer to that. But being able to go, oh, is always in the moment is satisfying. But when you're watching back the second time, because that's what I didn't watch episode 1 a second time until after I'd watched episode 2, and then I watched them both because when I was, okay, I'm going to sidetrack a bit. When I was listening to you guys talk about episode 1, I realized I would have really liked to be on that episode. So it was like, as you were talking, I was like, I'm responding. I'm like, wait, I'm not recording. What am I doing right now? But then as I was watching episode 2, I was like, see, I knew it. Like, you can't trust Milchick, things like that. Like, I liked
5
the
months
vindication.
my ass. Like, wow. Actually, like, wow. They really did that.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot in this episode that will either make you feel more curious or satisfy something that was scratching you from the first, which is why I'm happy that they split it that way. Because I think if we found out at the same time that Milchick was lying to them about 5 months, for instance, and then 2 scenes later we see that it wasn't really 5 months, I don't think it hits you as much as having it packaged in an entirely new episode as a separate perspective. Because then what that gives you is episode 1, you're focused on the innies being confused, like, what the hell is going on? It's a new season, and for us it's a new season, and for them it's a new, like, experience. They're just coming up. Lumon is different. There's purple all over the office all of a sudden, and they don't know what's going on. Then episode 2, we get to experience, we know Lumon is evil, but Jesus Christ, they are evil. 2 completely different shows. Like, I loved that.
They're also very well funded,
which one I like more. It's just...
Oh my God. Okay. I feel like this idea that Lumon is evil is something that they're playing with a lot this season. Because if season 1's question was, is Lumon evil? Season 2 is probably like, how evil are they really? Right? The level of gaslighting going on is phenomenal. Like, it's actually kind of astounding. Let's get back to the pineapples for a second, because why is it that they went straight to firing these guys? That's like, I want us to put ourselves in the minds of Lumon, so to speak. This whole incident happens, right? The OTC tragedy, or I guess as we're going to be calling it from now on, the macro dat uprising.
The macro dat uprising.
Yes. So the Macrodat uprising takes place, and their first move is essentially getting rid of everyone and silencing everyone. They know that they have to keep Mark, or they want to keep Mark. They have to decide what's going to happen with Heli, who we'll get to in a second. But then obviously Irving and Dylan are somewhat expendable. So he's like Milchick, he's like, should I fire them? Like, am I firing them? And, you know, Helena is basically just like, let Kira guide your hand, which is, you know, but he goes, and I'm just like, okay, is she telling him to kind of like make a decision on the spot as to what he's going to do? But no, like he literally goes there and he goes straight to firing them, and he does it with such surgical precision, knowing his audience each time, because I said this about Milchick last week. He knows his audience, like he knows who he's dealing with here. And with Irving, it's just like, you know, how can you do this? Like he starts like really soft, and then he decides like, okay, I'm just gonna let him go. I feel like with Irving, it seemed as though he was making a decision on the spot, but with Dylan, he went straight to like, yeah, you know, you were in an altercation, and I feel like he was taking it personally because he was actually literally in that altercation. Like we can see Dylan walking away from the office with his hand on his head with an ice pack, right? So imagine you're Dylan, you just come out of that elevator, your head hurts, you don't know why, right? Then somebody hands you an ice pack. And then you go home, you try to drive with said ice pack. You're finally settling it at home, and then the guy you barely ever see, Milchick, shows up at your house, and he's like, "You're fired." And he's like, "What am I gonna tell my wife?" And you know what? If you guys will permit me, I'm gonna go on a little Dylan rabbit hole here, because I don't know if he's like secure in his home. I don't know if he has a lot of stuff going on at home. I don't know like if he has issues with his family, if he's having issues financially. Maybe Lumon is not paying him as much as they're paying Mark with the freaking 20% raise that they offered him. Just to tell you how much they want him, right? But it's just like, I had a conversation with AJ as well, right? We were discussing kind of how Dylan operates on the surface. And it's kind of like he's asking for benefits. Like when we see him going through the motions of like, you know, developing after he's fired, he's looking for a new job, and you know, he's trying to take these interviews, and then he's frustrated. His wife is calling him on the phone. There are children that they have to take care of, and it's like, what does he spend his money on? Like it's been like a day, but he needs to get a new job to like support his family, right? But I'm wondering, like, is there something else that's bothering him? Does he need benefits? Because obviously, like, he's asked about benefits during the job interview. So I wonder if someone is sick. But then again, it could also just be that diapers are expensive, because, and they are, to be honest. I've heard from friends who have like little children, newborn babies, and they like diapers and baby food. Well, basically, you have to prepare to make sure they don't bankrupt you. So with that in mind, right, it now makes it all the more hilarious when I think about episode 1 and Dylan's first thing when Irv comes, it's like, are you poor up there? Right?
So ironic, isn't it?
Literally, because when you think about the fact that like aspects of their personality, like innate traits, seep through the 7th floor, it's like, of course, that is Dylan's first concern. He's like, are you poor up there? Because he's like, I know I'm not poor up there. Even though up there he's struggling. Like he's actually been struggling, and it's wild. And one final thing on this whole Dylan thing, right? The place where he does the job interview, it's called Great Doors, which is just too funny, because why is it that that's a place where all they do is make doors? And you know what's even funnier? Such places do exist. I'll take the funny even, like, I'm just going to take it up one more notch. Dan Erickson, who wrote this show, used to work at a door company.
See,
he worked at a door
that
company.
Would make sense.
Bro, he was like, I guess they just couldn't resist putting that Easter egg in the show, because he said he was fine at this job, but obviously it's the last thing he wanted to be doing with his life. So they put it in the show, and Dylan is going there at his lowest point trying to work for a door company and then doesn't get hired because he's severed. And the irony of that is the person who likes him but is saying, I'm not going to hire you because you're severed. He looks like he could be Dylan in like 20 years. Like what was up with that? Like it was like watching a mirror image. That was very trippy. Is it just me?
I love that shot where they go to like their side view.
Yeah.
Just before he
and then
said,
he goes,
you remind me of
myself,
me.
Dylan.
Yeah.
Like literally, you remind me of me, and I'm like, bro, are you guys messing with me right now? Like, are the writers of this show messing with me? Like, AJ asked me the same thing. Like, as soon as she saw it, she immediately texted me, and she was just like, "Why does this guy look exactly like Dylan?"
Do we think there's something like severophobia?
It's just the controversy of it.
Severism. Right? I don't know. What would we call it? Basically, the discrimination of severed workers.
Because I was like, severed. I just wrote severed discrimination is crazy, but even just
we have to check with the whole Mind Collective.
Do we think that's fair?
Do we think what is fair?
Because you get severed, you don't get to work anywhere else ever. Well, depending on where you're applying.
I suppose it depends on why people are against it. Like, is this a moralistic argument? Is this about the politics of it? Is this because they think they're doing something to themselves? And even if they are, like, it's to themselves and they're doing it of their own free will, right? So what is it that people have against severance? I think, well, hopefully over the course of this series, we'll be able to have a better understanding as to what people don't like about severance specifically.
I think it must be something that's so peculiar to everyone there that it just shocks you when you meet someone. I can imagine right now or if I go outside and I randomly just meet someone who tells me that they have two distinct selves, that when they go into an elevator or work, they just change into one person. And there's obviously some lack of education about it, I'm sure. But then there's also just that lack of knowledge as to what is happening in there. And Lumon comes across as this very morally bankrupt company. So nobody probably wants to be affiliated with that.
Yes.
Jerry, go on. I don't know. I feel like, at least the way it was filmed, I definitely, if you're asking me, do I think it's fair? I feel like, to me, the answer would be, the show is obviously telling you this is discrimination and it's not right. I think I kind of understand what you're saying here. What Ebube said, at the end of the day, they're doing it to themselves. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it's not affecting anybody, which is what you can say about a lot of issues when people are discriminating about different things. But at the end of the day, yes, there's no education about what people are up to on the 7th floor, and maybe that's also part of what's playing. They're like, oh, we don't know what kind of sick things you've done, you twisted individual, and now you want to come and work in my company. But it's still not fair. Like, at the end,
the way you say that,
the way I saw it was like he called it. What was the word he used? It's like it's abhorrent or something. He was like, personally, I can't remember the exact word he used, but he basically he looked up. He was getting along with Dylan, and that contrast is there to show you that it's discrimination. He was getting along with Dylan so well. He told him about their kickball league that they have on Fridays. Like, he was ready to offer him the job on the spot. Then he goes, oh, you're a severed, and the camera is like panned directly on his face so you can see his reaction, and then he's disgust. Everything else from that point is like, you filthy animal, why are you here? And there's no way that could be okay.
It's interesting though, because he says he worked for Lumon and the guy didn't flinch. But then once he told him he was severed, that's when the switch up came. Sorry, just to go off on Dylan's storyline, but something that was really interesting to me that I said I must mention on this episode, as an Arsenal fan, yeah. So in season one, I don't know if one of the writers is an Arsenal fan or a football fan, but the coincidence now is crazy. So in season one, Senator Arteta, his kids are named Kai and Declan. Kai and Declan, at the time season one was filmed, weren't Arsenal footballers, but now they are. And Arteta is the name of Arsenal's manager. Now, Mr. Saliba is Arsenal's central defender. That's the name of Saliba. That's the name of Arsenal's defender, Saliba.
But that's what scares me about that thing, though, because are we suggesting that Saliba is on his way out? I don't
I mean,
I don't even want
Severance
to
can predict the
engage
future.
with that because he hates Severance. He must yeah, no, I don't even want to engage with that. But yeah, I noticed that too when I was watching again. I was like, Mr. Like,
yeah, I
this
wonder where they're
that's too
picking the
much.
hats of names from. Are we going to see Mr. Saka in the next episode or something?
If we do, then we know something's up. If we do, then we know something's up. But actually, you know what? In the way of new characters, what do you guys think of Mr. Drummond?
Evil Rickon, I like him.
No, not Rickon. Mr.
No,
Drummond.
Evil Rickon.
Oh, Evil Rickon.
That's that's what I'm calling
That's
him.
great. That is great. Oh my god, you win an award for that one. Evil Rickon is fantastic.
I didn't.
You know he has like a
resemblance until now.
frolic hand tattoo. You saw that, right? And inside the break room, because they have this new graphic about like frolic, like frolicaholic, I think is what they call it. I don't know if that's like something within the world. And you can see all the influences in there. Like obviously, there's the entire gaslighting of the break room actually now being a literal break room with the TV. But I feel like this whole Mr. Drummond thing, it's interesting because it's like he's part agent, part bodyguard, part handler. Like we've seen characters like this before, but the way this show is approaching it is really something. And one of the first times we see him, obviously, is when James Egan comes to talk to his daughter. Like we heard all the things, like the few but glowing words he said at the end of season 1. And now he walks into his bathroom. Like Drummond comes in first and just stands, which already insane. It's like I'm watching a scene from Dune. Like these guys are like the Harkonnens or something, right? And then the door opens for him. Like somebody opens the door that we don't see, and then he just walks in, shock on his face.
Yeah.
Then his shock just gets into like this quiet, bubbling rage. And then he says, fetid moppet, and leaves. And she's just like, father? and then he just goes. And it's just like, bro, what kind of childhood did she have? Like for him to call her a fetid moppet is insane. Insane.
You can put that
What is a
side by side.
Because I had to Google this. What is a fetid moppet?
I mean, fetid is just like
find
something that stinks, and a moppet is like a kind of like a shaggy street urchin child, basically. So he's basically calling her like a smelly little brat, like she's one of the quote unquote pores. And it's like, what's going on? This is your daughter, the heir to your company. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I was gonna say you can put that scene side by side with any Logan and Shiv scene from Succession.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I feel like Logan had it. Actually, did Logan respect Shiv more? I was about to say Logan had more respect for Shiv, but I'm not even sure of that right now.
I don't think so, buddy.
I don't At least this
so.
guy respects her enough to not lie.
I think it honestly reminded me of that. And I went down the rabbit hole where I was looking at Heli, and I didn't realize there's so much sympathy for how she grew up all of a sudden, but there is, because her, what's the name of the actress that plays her? Oh my god,
Britt Lauer.
Yes, she said in an interview that Heli is Helena is the only child, so she hasn't got any siblings.
As much.
Yeah, so we can tell that there's a lack of love there. And I wonder if
maybe he wanted a son or something. It's one of those.
Also, and I wonder if there's a dynamic of pressure on her. I mean, all we've seen 100%. Is this ruthless woman. But what if she's actually someone who wants more out of life than being her father's heir?
I definitely think she is.
We see her rewind that kiss scene. Why is she rewinding that?
I have theories on that.
I have theories on that.
I feel like she's seen her experience something that she has no idea what it is. And again, this is
called freedom. It's literally called freedom. Because of the way she is on the outside and everything you just described, that's why her inner self is so, rebellious. Despite being equally entitled personally, is able to go for what she wants and is able to experience things. Like this is what somebody with that level of entitlement and, kind of freedom would do. when they're just like a fresh mind. That's what that
Yeah.
innie is.
Yeah.
But the Audi obviously has inhibitions. The Audi has responsibilities. The Audi has to make very, very dishonest videos that will go on TV and ostensibly social media to say that she was drinking and was just saying things that she shouldn't have been saying. Like,
Yeah.
the cover-up skills here are amazing. Of course, Natalie was involved. I have no doubts about that. But yeah, Jerry, what's your theory?
Oh, I think you kind of already touched on a lot of it.
Oh, that's you're thinking the same thing.
Was, I think it depends on if we do a deep dive into Heli and whether people think like which Heli is inside, whether it's Heli or Helena inside the on the 7th floor, because I don't know if we're going to go into that.
With that in mind, I think maybe this would be a good point to just like stick our hands up and be like which one we think it is now at this point in the season. I'm still with what I said last week.
I'm not ready to.
Okay.
I'm not ready to pick.
You think it's
I'm shredding it right now. I am doing this
I still think
quantum
it's the Audi,
computer thing,
personally.
and I'm threading both lines at the same time to figure out
Okay.
which one it is. Like I have theories. I have ways I look at scenes and interpret them as if this is Helena, then this would make sense. But if it's Heli, this would also make sense at this point. And that's why I'm saying that it also depends. Like, if I was looking at it from the perspective of Heli going as Helena Egan into Lumon's 7th floor, then I would be looking at that scene where she, for example, played, two things. First, I'll be looking at her notes in the kiss and thinking she's found something she can use, hence the smirk. But then the gasp, the way her eyes were when she kept rewinding, I'm thinking, one, like you guys have said, is she seeing something that the innie has that she doesn't? And two, or two, is it more like the same way they can be triggered on the inside by certain things, like, at least we can go into how the chip works later, by certain things like smell, maybe she too can be triggered in a weird way, and we might explore that later in the season. Like, that scene seemed to evoke some kind of emotional reaction that she herself does not yet understand. That's one side of things. The other side of things could be, well, actually, that will probably be more useful when we're talking about her inside of Lumon. But the way I looked at that scene from her going through the kisses, it was just that. It was, is she kind of it was those two things I was trying to track. Was she trying to figure out how she could use that to her advantage, which is what I initially thought. But I think on second thought, I'm also looking at it like from the perspective of her as a person that is trapped in, let's call it her position, even having to make that video, even having to answer to her father and everything. I think everything you guys have said at this point I'm rambling, but I'm trying to allow my mind to go on as many threads as possible as Heli and keep them all in mind, which is why I'm not willing to stake a claim on either right now. I think both are possible, and we can go into why over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a mix of the jealousy thing and a mix of the strategy thing. Like, she's partly jealous that her innie was able to achieve something like that, building a connection. And I think it's also a bit of strategy, like, okay, we can use this, or I can use this, depending on how it goes. Yeah, Chinedu, what do you think?
So it was my theory that it's not her. But I think on the balance of what we've watched so far, all evidence points towards it being Heli R that's on the 7th floor. I'm not ready to stake my 100%, but I think if I was a betting man, I would be able to put some money on it being Heli R that's in there. I think because on the balance of things, if you watch, and I know I'm flip-flopping right now, but a wise man changes his knowledge upon newfound information.
So they say.
But yeah, so obviously I banked on her not telling them what she found on the outside, but when you read what the creators say about episode 1 and that scene in particular, there's obviously the shame of finding out that, she was the one that started this revolution. Let's not get it twisted. She came in and threw this place upside down. And, it's like me waking up in Nigeria, hating Nigeria for everything that it is. And then I realized that I am the biggest hypocrite ever because I am the son of a politician, maybe, for example, or, something like that. I hate this institution so much, but I am their biggest ambassador. That must be such a shame.
And it's
And-
double shame. Like, it's double-sided, right? Because with
Yeah.
what you're saying, it's like Heli feels shame because of who Helena actually is.
Yeah.
And Helena feels shame because of what Heli inside has done to actually be the cause of this.
Yeah, exactly. So and also, aside the shame, when she tells her friends this, can they trust her now? Does she think they would trust her? Because
I see.
yeah, because think about these guys as toddlers. They don't know anything, and they don't know how good
Especially
these
Mark,
companies.
who still thinks the board will care what he thinks. But go on.
Exactly, and they don't even know how good the technology is. They're still trying to, they think Miss Casey is alive. They're still trying to tread the waters here, and then they find out that their best friend in at work is basically their biggest op. So she wouldn't want to divulge that information. And
that's true.
Also, no, sorry, go on.
No, saying that's true. Like, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah. So, and I know it was intentionally shot to show us that she entered into the elevators, and it's possible that maybe they turned off her own switch, but I don't think anyone can disagree that all evidence points it towards it being Heli R that's in there. That could change, but
fair point.
I think the only other thing that's yet to disprove my theory is, or my episode 1 theory is, watching her interactions with Mark, just her body language and how she smiles and how she reacts to Mark.
That's part of where it comes from.
But this is the problem. So, like, you've flipped from it's definitely Helena Egan to it might be Heli R, and I'm like, I was watching and then listening to you guys. I'm thinking, nah, that's for the same reasons as you. I'm thinking, nah, that has to be Heli R. But then watching back and then having this episode, I can see. And like, I'm not saying I agree with it, but I can see an argument for it to be Helena, just on the basis, like, so let's start with her interactions with Mark. When she came out of the break room and she's talking to him and bringing up his wife, even in the break room when she asked, "Oh my God, Mark, are you okay?" That felt like overcompensating. It felt like a person that had found out about the case and was thinking there must be a relationship here. It wasn't the kind of banter they had in season 1 where they would say something not inappropriate, but like make a joke about the thing and then check, are you okay? Right? Yeah. But then she came out of the break room and then they had a little bit of that. I'm like, okay, maybe it's going on the right side. It was that scene when they came out of the break room that made me start to think more like, could this possibly be Heli? Because from there, I'm starting to see, like, I think Ebube was saying it felt like she was gathering information. And I'm seeing you guys talk about her struggling with the computer switch and knowing and purposely pointing out at every chance she gets, remember that the cameras don't work anymore. Things like that would suggest, yeah, of course, it would be Helena. But then the conversation she has where she says literally, "We are not," that's what made me feel, okay, yeah, I'm comfortable. This is Heli R. But at the same time, like you're saying, there's double shame. I think after seeing this episode now, the same way that Heli would hate Helena, I expect that Helena hates Heli in the same way. So I think both of them are equally capable of making that statement of we are not our outies and we are not our innies. And I think the show is just doing a good enough job of making you believe that each one, like you can make an argument that everything that she would have said as Heli R, you can make an argument for saying it as Helena Egan. You can make an argument for saying it as Heli R. And I think that's why I'm not willing to toss and say I'm on this side of the camp just yet, because it could work.
Sorry, I'm very conscious we need to wrap this part up, but I'd just like to quickly throw in there that I know we're using her reactions to Mark, but let's also remember that these people are new to a lot of this. So they're new to feelings. And that could be a very, very awkward moment for them. And a lot of the time when teenagers, obviously they're not teenagers, but I'm trying to use their brains. When teenagers and toddlers like each other, they tend to overcompensate when they find out at times. Enough. And they tend to be very awkward with each other. We can see it in her reaction to him wanting to find Miss Casey or Miss Casey being his wife. So there's that too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. Let's talk a little bit about Bert specifically. Now,
Okay.
and I guess his relationship with Irving. Now, we see Bert at the payphone when Irving is making his call to what might ostensibly be the reintegration people. I don't know. It's hard to tell at this point, but obviously Irving is working with someone, but I didn't expect to see Bert on the outside, like tracking him, because it's like, okay, is he following the person who was at his door the other day, or has he actually been onto Irving for some time? And this is just like a normal thing for him. Like this tracking isn't a new thing. I'm looking forward to finding out more about that because, you know, watching these people on the outside and seeing what their lives are like, how they react to being fired, and then seeing also how they react to being rehired, I have to hand it to Milchick because, you know, he's really perfected the gaslighting skills. He comes with his basket containing the freaking pineapple. And, you know, they really want them to love these pineapples. Like they want them pineapple bobbing inside. I don't know if the pineapple symbolize something or if that's just some kind of joke from the writers. But, you know, Milchick comes in, he's all smooth. And generally, like, he has this leather jacket he's wearing from his motorcycle, which is like a whole thing. Like, I don't know who had Milchick being a motorcycle rider on their bingo card.
No,
but
I
you know,
love
if you
it.
did, well done to you. He has his leather jacket and like he's making all this noise. He puts the helmet on the table. Like, Rickon is loving this helmet. And obviously he goes to see Mark twice. And Mark decides to come back. And I think, you know, Milchick's work here, the way people, and also the way the severed employees behave on the outside, part of it I think is just proof that, you know, Lumon really is like a mega corporation. Because obviously now we know that it's been 2 days as opposed to 5 months. Yet they have this claymation video that's, well, actually stop motion puppetry, but yeah, it tells the story of what supposedly happened, along with the brand new break room, right?
Mm-hmm.
You mean to tell me that they did this renovation and expansion of that room, as well as a full-on mini feature animation in 2 days? Like, this is giving when they were asking,
Slave hours.
yeah, like it's insane because it reminds me of, you know, episode 6 of Succession's final season, when Greg is asking the video editor to make Logan say something he didn't actually say, and it actually ends up happening. Like this is that kind of corporate hand pulling, and I low-key enjoyed that because I don't know, like there's so much going on. It's all a mind game. The fact, for example, that, you know, when they get back to the severed floor, we just have like this little traces of the wellness center. Like it's there. They could have removed it completely, but you can actually see it on the wall. So like they can know, oh, it was here. It's not like, oh, the wellness center is gone. It's just like, oh, this is where it was, but like, why is it gone? So they can ponder that it's gone. You know, their little storage closet where they were hatching their plans, which was obviously the only place that didn't have any surveillance, is now like cabinets like that you can just open and you can get things from, because now there's nowhere that they can go where they're not seen. You know, so Mark is obviously reflecting on all this. He's not reflecting on it at first when, you know, he's meeting all those new people, which end up getting rid of. But I think the fact that, you know, Mark continues with the same energy is very significant. Obviously, they would have had a lot of discussions about that in the writer's room and even with the actor, Adam Scott, right? I believe Ben Stiller actually asked him, you know, what do you think Mark would do? What would you do in this situation? Like if you just found out who Miss Casey is and then next thing you know, you're back in the elevator, and then Adam Scott's answer was, you know, I'm going to start running and trying to find her. And that's exactly what they did. And they come up with that amazing sequence I talked about last week, where it's actually like 10 parts probably in that sequence. And I believe it took them 5 months to make, just him running through the hallway like that. We see so many things. We see like those other desks. We've seen that room before. Like, we don't know everything yet, but I like that they're trying to make things flow and they're making things feel natural, right? One thing I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think Cold Harbor means?
You're going into theory, like Reddit. mode at this point.
So
I have no idea.
I'm just saying, like,
Um,
it's worth thinking about, right? Because
what
we've
I
had
will
different
say
theories
is,
as to what these people are doing, like what
are you
macro
asking
data they
me?
are actually refining.
Are you asking me what I think they're doing, or why that file is? Because basically we know, we've seen file names before. Like Mark used to work on a file called Allentown. Now it's called Harbor. It's called Harbor. Are you asking what my theory of what Cold Harbor represents is, or why it's in Cold Harbor?
I am asking you what you think Cold Harbor represents, and
Okay.
in the way of that, what you think they are doing. It's both.
All right. So everyone has all their theories on what Lumon actually does. I think I'm glad to finally see some sort of sign, like the numbers actually mean something. Obviously, at the end of the last episode, like, I didn't go into too much detail. As soon as I finished, I literally messaged Chinedu, like, did it just anyway? Let me keep quiet. That's what I said, and I was thinking. I went back and I started to examine the screenshots, like, well, the screen anyway, and because I just paused and I couldn't make sense of it. Obviously, there's things like a build number, there's things like, so you know that there's probably iterations of how many times they've done this before. I think what that got me to do, and then them also talking about he has to finish Cold Harbor. What that got me to do is where I started talking about how the chip actually works. And so I started to think about that. One, from the perspective of how is it that the chip can actually block? So there are like 3 or 4 theories that spun out of this, but I'll focus mainly on the chip. Like, how is it actually able to block the memories or separate the memories across the locations? 1, 2, what's the location in the brain? What is it actually acting on? And then I started trying to look back to the opening credits from season 1 and noticing that every day the innies seem to be taken back into the syringe, or maybe the chip, and then brought back and taken back and brought back. Like, there was a lot there, and maybe in another episode or through the season we can deep dive into how the chip works. But I want to bring attention to something that might potentially, well, maybe I should talk about how the chip works. But anyway, the chip seems to be situated in the part of the brain called the amygdala, if that's how you pronounce it. Some people say it's the hippocampus, which would make sense because of memory, but it's big enough that it could reasonably sit like in the amygdala, and then
Probably.
like some parts are in the hippocampus. But let me just make sure that I have the list correct. But I wanted us to focus on what the amygdala does, because it's a part of the brain that does process memories, but it particularly helps us process emotionally, like some emotional responses, specifically aggression, sadness, fear, and to a lesser extent, pleasure. The amygdala also has links to your senses: sight, smell, touch, everything. And then I'm thinking, those 4 emotions sound so much like the woe, malice, dread. What's the last one? Frolic. And I'm thinking, okay, so if the theories of them refining Severance itself make sense, yeah, I probably should have gone into what I think the chip is doing in the brain, because that would actually make this part make more sense. But like, if the chip itself can actually, 1, sense those signals in your brain from those locations, and then we go back to season 1 where Cobell extracts PD's chip, and when she's talking to Greener, she doesn't say this is PD's chip, she says this is PD. She says this is PD, and then she says comb him for data.
That's a good shout, actually.
Yeah. And then
that's a good shout.
At the end of the episode, when James Egan is talking, he says, you will sit with me at the revolving. I think we're focused, too many theories are focused on, oh, they're cloning bodies. I think, no, they're not just cloning bodies. These guys are actually taking the personalities of people there. Some people call it creating a soul. I think revolving itself, like, someone talks about, I used to think that they were trying to create some digital afterlife. No, these niggas are trying to do alter carbon here. These guys are actually trying to find a way to recreate a person's personality and place it in a brain. I don't know if that's the exact, like,
it's possible,
verbiage I
right?
would use.
You're saying
coming back to
transferring
theories
as opposed
about
to cloning.
immortality and like transferred consciousness, I think something along those lines seems more likely now than, I mean, the cloning would still be a part of this theory, and the goes like you still need to create a body for this person. But taming the tempers, right? It could be literally just creating a new person with a specific ratio of the tempers that you can control. But it also could be finding the correct values for that particular person to recreate them. And that took me to one other theory about, well, that one is more about how evil Lumon can possibly be, but it took me to one other theory about what taming the tempers would literally do. If the numbers evoke certain emotions, they basically, the way they explained it was like, take for example, Gemma. Gemma died in a fire. Well, she died in a car accident that was burning. But let's just say you, as a person, you were in a house that was burning and you were scared. You survived, but you were scared. Now you associate the smell of smoke with intense fear. That could show up in the chips data as bad data because ordinarily that is just you're sensing smoke. There are 5 bins, but you're not able to classify that because it's so filled with intense emotions, and maybe that's what the refiners are doing. They're taking the data that is fear-based and saying, yes, there's a lot of fear attached to this, but we can see that this is sight data, this is smell data, this is touch data, things like that, and essentially removing the trauma that is attached to that memory, creating a more malleable worker, perhaps. I don't know about all those the whole thing of capitalism and creating a new worker, but I think it's more on the revolving and immortality than cloning. But they do say they want everyone to be Kia's children and everyone should have a severance trip. So I also don't know. And the Artetas are using severance for pregnancy. So again, I don't know.
Okay, well, that was elaborate. Interesting.
There's still more. That's the crazy thing. But now we can stop here.
My own theory of Code Harbor is so basic. It's set in it's the name of a war, or it's from
the battle
a
in the
war.
American Civil War.
Yeah. And so obviously a lot of souls were lost for the cause. So it's essentially maybe Lumon is not just doing one thing, like we've pointed out.
They're definitely not just doing one thing. Megacorps usually aren't.
They could be doing several things, but Code Harbor could be them using dead bodies or dead people for this specific project. And then maybe there's other things that they're doing. Maybe there's goats involved and all sorts. But this specific one could be a dead body based project where they take maybe the brain of someone or because in this episode, Milchick talks about how she couldn't be recognized at all. Was that Mark talking to Devon? Or
it was Mark talking to Devon, his sister.
Yeah.
Because that
Mark
confirms for us
Devon.
that it's not actually, because I think some people had thought that Miss Casey was like harvested from the crash or whatever. When her body was burned, he had to identify her. So this is either some kind of clone or a robot or something, like we don't really know, right? So I think you might be on the right track here. It falls in line with some of the theories that I had as well, but I still need some time to cook those ones, because Allentown, one of their other files, was also having to do with, maybe the American Civil War in one way or another. And that painting in front of the elevator, that new painting that's there, Kia pardons his betrayers. Why is he wearing a Union uniform from the American Civil War?
Oh,
just saying.
I didn't notice that.
Oh, shit.
Just saying.
Like, could Kier be? What side would? Yeah, exactly. Which side
it could be
would
an
Kier
alternate
have been
universe, but like I said, I'm still thinking about what this means. But Chinedu, actually, one thing I wanted to ask you, like, as you continue with this point, since we're now talking about what Lumon might be doing, and we've touched before on the fact that Cobell might be a threat, what did you actually think of that scene between Cobell/Selvig and Helena?
Cobell in the boardroom. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, in the boardroom.
I was thinking,
by the way, that whole shot when they showed her walking from, like, I don't know what these people are doing, man, but I just like that they took their time.
The
like the
dialogue was
cinematography
excellent.
for me is just loving everything. Even something as simple as like the over the shoulder shots. Like everything is so well framed. But yeah, please tell us what you thought of that scene and the dynamic between the two of them, especially considering the fact that Cobell has a bit of a different history with Heli R inside, right? It's like the control. Yeah, continue.
It's like having two cowboys in the middle of the town waiting for who would draw their gun first.
So you're saying the tension could have been cut with a knife. Got it.
Yeah. But I love the dialogue. It was perfect. I think, obviously, as we said this earlier, but I do think there's an element of history there. And I think this episode also showed us how powerful Helena is. I think previously in this season, we kind of just see her as a daughter of, the owner or the CEO of this company, who's just, offering herself to show that this thing is good. But we see her in the boardroom. We see how powerful she is. She's making shots. She's calling shots. She comes in and the way she delivers that line, please sit. Like, this is someone with so much power.
And influence.
And influence. So I loved watching it, and I loved because Cobell is a bit unhinged.
A bit.
So you don't know.
You don't let me start.
Fully unhinged. So you don't know what to expect from her, and I think just the tension there and watching this character that is a maverick, for lack of a better term, and this person who is just so powerful, just come together and face off. Yeah, you don't know what direction this conversation is going to go, and you don't know where the power is going to swing. I just enjoyed watching that power struggle between both of them. Because, normally she would offer that promotion and someone would probably just bite her hand off it. But she's saying, no, I want to come back to the severed floor. So yeah.
And it makes you wonder why, like what her own attachment is there. Like what is she hoping to achieve?
Yeah.
I have a question about that though. Because from the opening credits, there's the idea that Mrs. Cobell is still a very present entity in the whole season.
New visuals for the title sequence, by the way.
And I haven't had time to really digest them, but like I keep there's a lot. But like I guess I left that when you were leaving that scene, before you saw her again talking to Mark, did you think she took the job, or did you think she was like, no?
I felt like she wasn't going to take the job. I felt like at first I thought maybe she would take the job just to still be nearby. But the thing is, we don't know what her ultimate goal is. Yeah. So it's quite possible that leaving and not taking the job would serve her better, right? Because speaking of her being unhinged, like we see that interaction with Mark, like he comes and she's just with her whole voice thing. It's like, Mark, just back from work, and like, which she needs to stop doing that. And I guess she'll stop now because now she's going full mask off. And
she
Mark
comes across as such a creep.
Like,
oh god, it's season one. I was always like,
oh my goodness. And Mark
so...
Mark is trying to be like, look, I understand that you have some stuff going on, but you need to give me some answers. And he's actually being assertive. Like he goes and steps in front of the car. But whoa, that scream with the horn, with the car horn at the end, I had to be like, wait, there's nothing around me that's like making noise, right? Because that was so like shrill. Like I don't know how to describe it. Like it was really guttural. It was like something in her was trying to escape, which probably is the case anyway. And then she just like bolts off like in the car, like in a way we haven't really seen anyone drive in this show. So like, I wonder if we'll get a car chase. Like, why would she leave like that? And she clearly doesn't want to give answers. And the reason, and she screams, and it comes after her reaction facially to the question of, do you know something about Gemma? So it's like, what does she know? Like, why was Mark hired? Why don't they want to lose him? Like, these are all questions I'm hoping will get answered through the course of the season. But
there is one more. I know the board wants us to wrap up the Cold Harbor thing, but there is one more just on the Cobell thing. This one is definitely theory central, but like basically people were talking about how Cold Harbor seemed to be like a code name they were using when they were filming the second season in somewhere in Canada. So people that were like local thought it was a completely different show, but they thought it was Severance, but they couldn't think it was Severance because it was always Cold Harbor casting. So they were always wondering, like, do we get an outie episode where we go to Harmony Cobell's roots or something? Like, I don't know if there's like obviously any connection there, but like there is this idea, there seems to be some mystery thing, something about a drug addict, blah, blah, blah. Like maybe we will actually have some deep dive into Cobell in some location that we haven't yet seen, or that, I don't know, but like just putting it out there that Cold Harbor at the same time when they were filming, there was some mystery about the fact that it was seeming to be a code name they were using to film certain parts of season 2.
Yeah, I mean, I have asked before as well, you know, if Cobell is actually a villain. It's something to consider, I suppose. Perspective is a really key factor in how the show's storytelling operates. And I think it's worth noting that they only brought the team back because they believe the team's presence is the only way Mark will finish the file.
Yeah.
And I guess to kind of close the loop on something that was brought up earlier regarding Heli and the well, I guess which one of her is inside.
Yeah.
I think it's possible that there is some kind of reverse overtime contingency, because obviously the chip that causes the actual severance is an actual chip in your head. Like this is surgically included. Like they had to drill into their brains, right? So it drills into their skulls and actually put the thing inside their brains. So, you know, that's kind of how I'm feeling about it. So yeah, I guess you guys are right that we're not going to know who's who. But like I said, perspective matters a lot. You know, Devin, obviously, I mentioned in our season 1 recap that I want to see more of her, and I want her to have more to do in season 2, right? And so far, I'm getting my wish. You know, she clearly believes that, you know, Innie Mark was talking about Gemma, and, you know, how do I put this? Devin believes that, you know, Innie Mark, in saying she's alive, was talking about Gemma, but everybody else is like, no, like talking about something else, like, you know, the baby essentially. And I like how they did that, because I didn't even realize they were going to use that angle. At the end of the first season, the whole thing of like, oh, she's like, this guy saved the baby, you know, I found her, it was me. Like, let's not weirdo. I don't know when next we're going to see him, but at the same time, you know, it now creates this dichotomy of like, you know, or I guess this debate of what Mark was actually talking about. So Devin, being Devin, is like, you know, how do we know that it wasn't Gemma? And Mark is obviously like, what do you mean? Like, it couldn't have been anything else. Like, Mark obviously wasn't there. Like, Audi Mark wasn't present when that happened. Then Milchick shows up and nobody seems to be happy that he's around, which tells me a lot about how, you know, the family feels about Lumon. And, you know, Mark is obviously thinking about, like, you know, he's quitting and all that stuff. But, you know, Audi Mark rejects that idea that he was talking about Gemma, because all this time he spent grieving, he's not going to just easily accept that Gemma is like running around somewhere.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So how do you think the show is going to approach that going forward? Like, because the more we find out about Gemma, the more Audi Mark is going to be doing that exploration as well. And that could change his belief on a lot of stuff. Like, it could really make him, you know, the kind of person who is still sad and angry, but has the sense of like purpose and fervor that his inner self has. So is that going to change him? Are they going to become more and more like each other? Like, I don't know. What do you think? Chane, did you have thoughts on that?
Okay, so I'll try and address it, because I feel like there are two questions in there. So the first one is, well, you've already kind of answered the question, but I do agree that he's rejecting the idea because he doesn't want to open that box again. I've not experienced death, but I know that as human beings,
You mean loss, right? Because I would hope you've never died before.
I've not experienced loss.
You never know.
Maybe
Okay.
I'm a servant worker.
just
You
checking.
don't know. But so yeah, I might be a servant worker. You never know. But yeah, I haven't experienced loss before, but I do know that as human beings, when we experience pain, natural reaction is to not want to, go back and kind of break that down again. And we don't know if Mark has seen a therapist, though. We don't even know what his
He's
situation
definitely
is like.
not. That guy, his
Exactly.
therapy
It's
is
just
drinking and at home in the dark.
Exactly. So there's that. And I saw somewhere where they said Mark might have taken the decision to reintegrate. So I think, where you said maybe they're becoming closer. In episode 1, we see a figure behind him when he runs or when he's running around trying to get
We do see that figure. Who do you think it is?
Yeah.
to the break room. So apparently that might be him. And his transitions in the elevator are different. I don't know. Like, look,
Okay.
yeah, Bankley and I were
The only
talking
way it's
about
him.
how
Oh my
Banky
God.
and I were talking
I
about
mean,
how,
PD did have those weird distorted memories when he.
yeah, but so again, this theory says PT did not follow the guide on reintegrating.
course.
That's why he was experiencing the sickness. But
Okay, we're actually discussing this. Okay, go on. Please continue.
But
What did you
Mark,
and Barkley talk about?
discussing this?
No, I need to know. Nah, we must know. Let's continue
No.
now.
No. So Banky we didn't actually discuss it. I think I was just talking to Banky about how many theories there are in Severance and how deep people pick up on anything, screenshots, Zoom pictures. Anyways, so the theory is that is the only way Mark would have convinced himself to go back to work. He's holding up this facade in front of Devon that he's not going to, open that box of Gemma again. But his natural curiosity is to call back. What's the name of the doctor that did the severance procedure? I've forgotten her name.
Ragabi.
Yeah, Ragabi. So he's called Ragabi back to basically reintegrate, and that's why he's experiencing that, and that's why Mark S. But this one is, I don't think that one holds proof. Well, Mark S. is basically assertive more, but I think that's just because he's obviously pissed off at the company, so that one doesn't hold water.
Wow. Okay.
But the shadow,
I definitely think he's still severed.
The shadow, the transitions in the elevator, and just the general curiosity, and also the trailers as well. The trailers just pans in between. I know they've done that for some time, but it almost feels sharper this time.
I would like to add to that because the thing is, one of my first notes this season, when Mark sat with his new work, the new innies, and he was different, one of the first notes I took down was, has Mark already reintegrated? And they took it when they still told us it was 5 months. It seemed plausible because I was overthinking. Obviously, I was looking at the scenes from the trailer in the diner where it seemed like Devon was convincing him, and then something must have driven him to go investigate. But I don't think the show is taking that particular route of telling the story. I think if you take the rejection, it kind of also follows the original Mark from season 1's reactions to meeting PT. PT comes to him with this grand plan, and he's like, okay, but I actually like Severance, so I'm not going to reintegrate. It looks like it's going to kill you, so good luck with that, but I'm fine as I am. But he's curious enough, and the signs are present in his life enough that he slowly starts to question things. Devon telling him that he might not necessarily be saying, I don't think you're right. I think he's kind of like, I don't want to. It's simpler for me to just go on as I already have. I've been through the grief. I don't want to go through it again, like you said. But also think about the idea of, why would you allow yourself hope that she's alive again only to actually discover that, nope, you were actually talking about the baby, right? Like, why go through that process? But at the same time, Mark being Mark, having that same personality, his curiosity will get the better of him, and he will obviously want to go in. Obviously, we later find out that it's only been 2 days, and so the decision is still partially also brought back by a lot of other factors. And we should probably be talking about, again, Milchick, Master Manipulator. He's so good at reading his audience. He starts with the first meeting in the house, and it's like, I would hate to reward his bravery with non-existence. I'm like, Jesus Christ, you like, that is true. But then the deeper one is when he comes to convince him. He gives them the raise, tells him about reform, but then he comes back and he's like, how do you feel? Like, do you still feel the same way about Gemma? He's playing on the exact same personality trait Mark has without realizing it. But he says, Mark is having a happy, fun, loving life, and that will soon rub off on him. I think that's a bigger
which is
motivator
ridiculous,
right
though,
now
in a way,
to come into the office than potentially, like, at least for our team Mark, than potentially exploring Gemma's disappearance or death, or because he saw the body as far as he knows. But right now, we're just seeing Milchick as a fucking, like, G, like, he's evil, but like, he's an evil genius.
I'm looking forward to learning more about why Milchick would push all this in this way, because definitely he has a story too. And Tremel Tillman is incredible at portraying this character.
Yep.
But yeah, the level of gaslighting required to make Mark consider it in this particular format, like consider the whole, is it like, how is this affecting your innie in the context of Gemma? It's an interesting thing to think about, because obviously, this, like, Audi Mark doesn't really believe that Gemma could be alive, or that Miss Casey could be anything. It doesn't really know anything about Miss Casey. But yeah, that's an interesting perspective on it. It's probably a good place to call it, actually. I think we've cooked a bit in this episode. I'm a little bit less confused, but not really. So do you guys have any final thoughts before we close this one up?
No,
I think
good.
I think that was the last big one. Yeah, just Milchick's thing about grief. Oh yeah. What is grief if not love, Percy? And you know the rest.
You couldn't resist, huh?
Yeah, I couldn't, because like love and grief, I just couldn't, like that. The dichotomy or whatever it was right there. Like PD, as soon as he said it, I went straight back to the PD line, and then I went to the Vision line. I was just was there.
Yeah, I get you. Well, I guess my final thing will be just something about the tone of the show that I kind of realized. I was, watching the credits, as I do sometimes, and I noticed that one of the executive producers of the show is Bo Willimon, who is the creator. Bo Willimon, who is the creator of House of Cards. And there's something that made something click for me, because I think there's something in the tone of that show that I can kind of feel here. Like, there's something about the clean, like very, very pristinely shot landscape views that exist in this show that would be influenced by someone like him. Specifically, that whole thing where Helena is walking to the boardroom from that corridor with Milchick. That felt kind of House of Cards to me. So I think seeing Bo Willimon's name in the credits really just like that like opened a new window for me, so to speak. It's interesting to see the team that works on this show. They clearly work very hard. I commend them quite a bit. It's like so much thought goes into it, and I just love being able to experience something that people clearly thought deeply about. So yeah.
I'm really hoping that this is not the last we see of Mark Wilkins, his funny thing about I'm going to see you 3 days, that was funny. But I'm hoping that it's not the last we see of Alia Shawkat, because I was really excited when they cast her, and if they just had her for one episode, I'd be really sad. Like, I need more. I want to know what happened in 5X, and why when Milchick mentions that he got some people from 5X, they seem disappointed, but they're like, that's what we have to work with, so let's just do it. And the other thing is, in that scene, he describes the people he hired, but he seemingly doesn't describe the child. So who the hell is that child? Is it actually a goat?
The child being a
Okay.
goat is crazy. I'm just gonna have to stop you there because because
No, I'm playing.
that's
But I do
quite
want
a
to know
lot.
more about the child.
We will learn more about Miss Hong, hopefully in episode 3, where we will be seeing you all again. Thank you so much for listening up until this point. Definitely check out everything else we're covering. We have a bunch of stuff going down with the Is This Cinema team. They are on fire this year already. And, the Oscars are coming up soon. So we have a lot of movies to talk about. We're going to keep covering Severance every single week. Next week, we will have AJ on. And I know she's going to have quite a few things to scream about. Keep it locked to the Popcorn for Dinner feed. And we'll see you in the next one.